I'm Jake Martin. I'm 36 years old, and I spent 14 of those years in the U.S. Army as a logistics officer. This morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table, slowly wiping the dust off my old desert boots, the ones I hadn't worn since I left the base for the last time. They were still scuffed along the soles from all the miles I walked between supply depots and command tents. But that dust was new. Home dust. The kind that settles when everything else stands still. Most mornings, I just make coffee, feed my dog, and skim the news. But today, I stopped. Just stared at those boots and felt this strange calm. Like the air right before a storm rolls in. The quiet kind, where nothing's wrong on the surface but your gut knows better. I joined the Army at 22, never missed formation, never showed up late. I logged every shipment, signed every form, and followed every rule like my paycheck depended on it. Because it did. That's who I was. The reliable one. Never flashy. Never the guy in the spotlight. Just the one everyone knew would get things done. 14 years, 2 deployments, 5 bases, dozens of inspections passed without a scratch. But I never made a major. Never got invited to those fast-track mentorship dinners or the briefings with brass behind closed doors. They liked me where I was. Steady, invisible, dependable. That was the word they used the most. Dependable, like a machine. And I wore that label with pride. I never complained. Not even when the wrong people got the credit or the wrong people got promoted. I just kept showing up, kept doing the work. Until one day, all that discipline, all that loyalty got turned against me. I didn't see it coming at first. Thought it was just another mix-up, another routine change. But that day, when I brushed the dust off my boots, was the last quiet morning I'd have for a long time. Because the system I'd spent my whole life serving was about to push me out. And it wasn't because I broke the rules. It was because I followed them too well. My last assignment was at a logistics unit based in Fort Hood, Texas. I was still doing what I'd always done. Manage supply lines, track shipments, balance the books. Nothing fancy, but it mattered. We supported multiple battalions, and I made sure they had what they needed when they needed it. For 1 month, the numbers stopped making sense. At first, it was just a line item in the monthly operating budget labeled External Operations Support. It was vague, but not unheard of. I flagged it for review. There was no invoice, no requisition form, no point of contact. I asked the finance team about it, and they shrugged, said it came from higher up. I pushed again, and this time, my captain pulled me aside. He kept it casual, told me not to worry about it, said it was probably a classified contract. Not my concern. But it didn't sit right. I'd been doing this long enough to know what routine looks like, and this wasn't it. Still, I dropped it, temporarily. The next week, another odd entry popped up. Vendor transfer, logistical coordination, 58 grand. Again, no documentation, no assigned vendor. Just a green-lighted expense with nothing behind it. I requested backup records and got silence. So I checked the database myself. The vendor code didn't even exist. I brought it up during a routine resource meeting. Nothing dramatic. Just asked if anyone else had seen odd charges like these. The room went quiet. One of the majors coughed and changed the subject. Afterward, my supervisor found me in the hallway, said I should stop digging, that I was making people nervous. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a clerical error. This was intentional, controlled. And bigger than just a bad code or a missing form. Something was being moved, shifted, hidden. And everyone either knew and kept quiet or didn't want to know at all. I didn't talk about it after that, not out loud. But I started keeping records, snapshots, copies of entries, notes in a private log. I wasn't trying to blow anything up. I just wanted to understand why no one else seemed to care. I'd seen mistakes before, even fraud. But this was different. It felt sanctioned. Like someone in command was letting it happen, or worse, ordering it. The more I saw, the more I felt it creeping in. The sense that I was seeing something I wasn't supposed to. Like I'd walked through a door that should have stayed shut. I started to feel it in the way people looked at me. Conversations stopped when I walked into the room. Emails that used to CC me suddenly left me out. I wasn't being punished, not yet, but I was being warned. That kind of quiet is louder than shouting, and it told me everything I needed to know. Something was wrong, and I wasn't supposed to notice. Each night, after the base lights dimmed and the silence settled in, I sat at my small kitchen table with a second-hand laptop and a half-drunk cup of coffee. I wasn't streaming movies or catching up with friends. I was combing through modules on fraud detection, vendor profiling, and shell corporations, topics no one in my unit even thought about. It started as curiosity. I needed answers no one seemed willing to give. Those vague line items and duplicate payments were still rattling around in my head, and no amount of being told to forget them could push them out. The courses weren't flashy, just quiet voices in recorded webinars, walking through case studies and audit techniques. I took notes by hand. I didn't want any traces on my work devices. At work, I applied what I learned, subtly. I reviewed vendor profiles with new eyes, cross-checking addresses and tax IDs. One vendor was registered to a vape shop on the edge of town. Another was linked to a bakery that had been closed for 2 years. I didn't accuse anyone. I just kept logging the anomalies. A spreadsheet on a thumb drive with tabs for vendor names, payment amounts, approval chains, and red flags. Each flag added weight to the feeling in my chest. Not fear, not yet, more like a slow-burning unease. Like I'd opened a door that wasn't meant to be touched. One night, I found a vendor name so generic it barely registered, Eagle Strategies, LLC. But there were no invoices, no contracts, just 2 payments totaling over $70,000, approved within 10 days of each other. The address led to a strip mall with a liquor store and a pawn shop. No office, no signage. I double-checked with Google Street View and base procurement records. Nothing lined up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor with printouts spread around me like some kind of crime scene. My cat, Rusty, pawed at a receipt while I drew arrows between vendor names and addresses. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my CO, not my old buddies from deployment. I wasn't ready. I needed more proof. It wasn't about revenge or showing off. It was about knowing something was wrong and not being able to walk away from it. I'd spent 14 years following orders, keeping my head down, doing the right thing. But now I have realized that doing the right thing might mean breaking the silence. And that silence was starting to crack. The first time I saw Colonel Drew Langley, he was stepping out of a black Suburban, sunglasses on, talking into a headset like he was briefing the Pentagon. He moved like a man who had never been told no, smiled like he already knew what you were going to say. Langley wasn't just another officer. He was the general's golden boy, the one who showed up with polished boots, rehearsed charm, and just enough tech jargon to sound like he was saving the future. He talked about innovation pipelines and operational synergy. But behind the flash, he started rerouting funds. At first, it was subtle, a new logistics strategy. Then came the vendors. Private contractors with names like Stratcor and Delta Pulse. No one questioned them, not out loud. They were supposedly helping modernize supply chains and optimize transport layers. But when I looked closer, nothing matched. Vendor records were incomplete. No tax IDs. No physical offices. The addresses pointed to mailbox rentals or virtual office fronts. I started cross-referencing names tied to vendor ownership. One kept popping up, Shane Langley. Drew Langley's cousin. He wasn't listed on base access. No contractor badge. Just a paper trail that connected him to 3 new vendors that had been paid over $200,000 within 6 weeks. I didn't say anything. Not to my team, not to anyone. I just started building a profile. Late at night, I'd sit at my desk with a notepad and draw it all out. Payments, vendor names, the digital fingerprints that link them. Every few days, another strange approval would show up, always cleared by Langley's desk. He'd walk through the unit like he was bulletproof, shaking hands, grinning, talking about efficiency like it was gospel. People listened. They didn't question. He had charm and connections. Everyone knew his uncle was a retired major general who still had pull in DC. So I stayed quiet. I nodded in meetings, acted like nothing was wrong, but every night I updated the file. Each new vendor made the pattern clearer. The payments weren't random. They followed a rhythm, small enough to avoid suspicion, fast enough to add up. I was onto something, but I couldn't move too fast. One wrong step and I'd be out before I could finish what I started. So I played my part, kept the reports clean, smiled when Langley made another buzzword-filled announcement. But inside, I was watching, documenting, waiting, because I knew what I was looking at now, and it wasn't just shady bookkeeping. It was theft, hiding behind polished boots and high-level clearance, and sooner or later, it would unravel. They called it a meeting, but it felt like a sentencing. I walked into the office expecting a routine update. Instead, there was a major from admin, a civilian HR rep, and a printed folder with my name on it. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't accuse me of anything criminal. Just quietly stated I had misused my training funds by taking courses that implied investigative intent. I sat there listening, hands still, face neutral. The HR woman spoke in soft, rehearsed tones, reading lines that had clearly been approved higher up. They said it wasn't aligned with my duties as a logistics officer. I asked if they found anything false in my work. They didn't answer, just repeated the words scope, policy, and deviation. Langley wasn't there. Of course not. His name didn't need to be in the room. His fingerprints were already all over the decision. They slid a paper across the table. Early release. 2 months of benefits if I signed the NDA and kept quiet. It was dressed up like a compromise, but it felt like exile. I didn't yell, didn't argue. I just sat back and looked at the badge on the wall. 14 years of service, never late, never suspended, not a single black mark until now. They asked for my ID and base pass. I reached into my pocket, handed them over, then I stood up. My voice stayed steady. I told them I appreciated the clarity and I'd be leaving without the signature. The HR woman didn't flinch. She had said this speech before. I walked out into the Texas heat, holding my lunch bag like it was the only thing that belonged to me. My boots felt heavier than they ever had, but I didn't drag them. Back at home, I didn't sit. I pulled the blinds, locked the door, and pulled out the backup drive from my bag. Every invoice, every file, every map I'd built, I laid it all out on the kitchen table. Printed logs, vendor registrations, approval chains with Langley's initials stamped at the bottom. I didn't feel rage. I felt purpose. Betrayed, yeah, but not broken. The uniform had been part of my life for half of it. But the truth didn't need a uniform. It needed a voice. That night, I started building what would become the report. Not just for the chain of command, for the system that refused to see itself. No more whispers. No more waiting. They thought firing me would end it, but they just gave me the time to finish what I started. I worked in silence, no distractions, no music, just the hum of my old desktop and the click of keys. Every piece of evidence was double-checked, labeled, and copied to 2 separate drives. I used the formatting from the audit templates I'd studied. Color-coded tabs, summary sheets, cross-referenced indexes. Everything linked, nothing speculative, just raw, verifiable truth. The report ran over 100 pages. I printed 3 hard copies, each in its own binder. One for legal, one for audit, one for the external oversight office. The night before I sent it, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the covers. My name wasn't on the front, didn't need to be. The facts spoke loudly enough. I zipped up the digital folders, added password protection, attached the right contacts. My hands didn't shake. At 8:04 a.m. the next day, I hit send. 3 emails, 3 attachments. The truth, deployed. It didn't take long. By noon, someone from the audit replied, "Urgent review initiated." The word escalated was in bold. By 2 p.m., investigators were on base. No announcement, just 4 suits walking past the front gate with no rank but all the authority. They didn't knock on doors, they opened them. Started pulling files, reviewing access logs, and checking procurement terminals. Langley disappeared from his office for hours. His assistant looked like she'd seen a ghost. The chain of command went quiet. Meetings were canceled. Phones stopped ringing. The whole place held its breath. By evening, the command center felt hollow. Like everyone was still there, but no one wanted to be seen. Someone tried to scrub the vendor entries, but the logs were backed up. I had screenshots, timestamps, and metadata. Nothing could be buried anymore. The silence wasn't peace. It was fallout. I watched from home, alerts pinging every hour, confirmations from legal, calls missed from blocked numbers, a LinkedIn message from someone in D.C. asking if I'd consult. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for congratulations. I wasn't done. The next day, a memo went out. Internal review, financial discrepancies, cooperation required. No names, no blame, just smoke before the fire. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over a quiet street. Inside, the truth had landed like a bomb. Not loud, not fiery, but precise, unstoppable. I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. And now it had begun.